Have you ever thought that a single family visit or even a weekend getaway could put your green card at risk? Imagine returning from a short trip abroad, passport and documents in hand, only to be stopped at the border and told you may not be allowed back into the United States. This is the new reality for many green card holders. And the surprising part is, the law itself hasn't changed. What's changed is how strictly it's being enforced. Border officers, immigration courts, and even the IRS are working together in ways they never did before. That means rules you once felt safe following, like keeping trips under 6 months, carrying a re-entry permit, or filing your taxes, are now being reinterpreted. And one small misstep could undo years of hard work. In this video, I'll walk you through 10 critical travel rules you need to know in 2025. These aren't the obvious ones everyone talks about. Some of them are hidden traps you won't hear about until it's too late. And trust me, rule number 1 is the harshest of them all. It's blindsiding thousands of people just before their citizenship interviews, and it could cost you not only your application, but your green card itself. So stick around until the very end to make sure you don't fall into any of these traps. And before we dive in, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to Wings of Wonder, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update that could save your residency and your future. Number 10. Taxes as proof of residency. When most people think about losing their green card, they think about time spent outside the U.S. too long abroad, too many absences. That's the classic worry. But in 2025, the real danger isn't your travel history, it's your tax returns. For decades, the IRS and immigration services operated in their own separate lanes. But those walls have collapsed. Now, your tax records are being cross-checked with immigration files. And if they don't match the story your passport tells, you could be in trouble. Here's an example. One man owned a home in California. He never stayed abroad for more than 3 months at a time. He thought he was safe. But when he applied for citizenship, the officer noticed he had filed taxes as a non-resident to avoid double taxation. That single detail, just one tax filing choice, was enough to derail everything. His application was denied and his green card was placed under review. And he's not alone. In 2024, more than 600 green card holders faced delays or denials, not because of travel patterns, but because of tax inconsistencies. Even listing a foreign mailing address or claiming foreign tax credits, something that's legal in the eyes of the IRS, can be interpreted by immigration as proof that you've abandoned U.S. residency. Lawyers call this the silent trap. You could follow every travel rule, live in the U.S., and still lose your green card because of how one form was filled out. In this new climate, what you write on your tax return may carry more weight than the green card in your pocket. Number 9. Public benefits and healthcare. Many green card holders assume that since they've worked, paid into the system, and contributed to U.S. society, they have every right to use benefits like Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. But in 2025, these very benefits are being used as weapons against permanent residents. Why? Because federal audits uncovered millions of dollars in benefits being claimed by people who actually live overseas. Immigration officers are now treating any benefit usage as a potential red flag. Imagine this: you spend a few months abroad but use your U.S. healthcare coverage for a surgery. From your perspective, it's your right. You've paid into the system. But when immigration cross-checks your benefits usage with your travel record, it suddenly looks like fraud. In 2024, hundreds of green card holders were flagged this way. Some were detained, some were referred to immigration court, and a few even had their cards revoked outright. One striking case involved a woman who lived mostly abroad but came back periodically to reset the clock. She used her U.S. healthcare plan for a surgery, and when she returned, officers confronted her with her benefits history. Her green card was placed under review immediately. Immigration officials now call this residency fraud hiding in plain sight. Even one medical claim could be interpreted as proof that you're exploiting the system. The bottom line? What used to be private, your healthcare history, is now evidence. Number 8. Emergency trips aren't safe. You'd think emergencies would be the one exception. A sick parent, a funeral, a family crisis. Surely officers would understand, right? Unfortunately, compassion doesn't protect you under today's rules. Immigration attorneys have seen a surge in heartbreaking cases. Take the daughter who left the U.S. for 4 months to care for her dying father. She returned with every possible proof of intent: medical documents, round-trip tickets, proof she maintained her U.S. home. None of it mattered. She was pulled into secondary inspection, interrogated, and her green card is now in limbo. And she's not an isolated case. Since 2024, emergency travel cases have tripled. At least 500 permanent residents have been detained or flagged after what they believed were unavoidable crises. Some walked away with warnings. Others had permanent notes placed in their file, guaranteeing they'll be scrutinized at every future entry. Why? Because the system doesn't weigh why you left anymore. It only looks at how your travel appears on paper. If it disrupts your residency pattern, it can be used against you, even if the reason was life and death. Critics call this inhumane, but officials argue too many people used family emergencies as excuses to quietly live abroad while enjoying U.S. benefits. And so the rule now is harsh, absolute, and without exceptions. It means the very moments when you're most vulnerable, dealing with tragedy, are the moments when your green card may be most at risk. Number 7. Social media and your digital footprint. In the past, your travel record was just about stamps in your passport, entry dates, and re-entry permits. But today, immigration officers are digging much deeper into your digital life. Yes, your Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, even location tags and captions are being quietly monitored and sometimes used as evidence against you. Why does this matter? Because officers are now trying to determine whether you really live in the United States or whether you're using your green card as a pass while building a life elsewhere. And your own posts can give you away. Take this case. One man never stayed outside the U.S. for more than 3 months. On paper, he was safe. But his Instagram told a different story. Photo after photo of him working on long-term projects abroad. Immigration officers flagged it as evidence that his real life wasn't in America. When he landed back in New York, they already had a file prepared. He was pulled into secondary inspection and is now fighting to keep his status. The problem? Social media is subjective. A casual caption like "living abroad for a bit" could be taken literally. A throwback photo posted during a trip might look like you're still overseas. Even something as small as tagging yourself at a foreign workplace could raise red flags. Critics call this digital profiling, punishing people for what they share online. But officials defend it, saying, people reveal more online than they ever admit at the border. The takeaway? In 2025, your online presence is more than personal. It's public record. Think carefully before posting, because even a harmless update could be interpreted as proof you've abandoned your U.S. home. Number 6. Frequent short trips equals sign red flag. For years, green card holders were warned about the long trips, the 6-month absences, the year abroad, the obvious gaps. But in today's climate, it's not just the big trips that matter, it's the frequent short ones. Let's say you take a dozen small trips, 2 weeks here, a month there, maybe quick quarterly visits to family or work overseas. You might think you're safe since none of them cross the 6-month threshold. But immigration officers are now looking at patterns, not durations. Immigration lawyers call it residency by algorithm. Your entire flight history is fed into systems designed to detect frequent exits. And if it looks like your lifestyle is rooted abroad, even if each trip is short, that pattern can be flagged as evidence you're not maintaining residency. The numbers are eye-opening. Since early 2024, more than 1,200 green card holders were flagged at airports after taking just 4 or more short trips in a single year. Many thought they were playing it safe. Instead, they were pulled aside, interrogated, and in some cases issued notices to appear in immigration court. Here's the irony. Someone who leaves once for 6 straight months may pass without issue, while another who leaves monthly for a week at a time could be accused of abandoning their U.S. home. It's no longer about how long, it's about how often. This new interpretation punishes global professionals, business travelers, caregivers, and anyone with strong family ties overseas. Critics call it unfair. But immigration officials argue too many people were using green cards as commuter passes to live abroad while dipping back into U.S. privileges. So, what's the lesson? Don't underestimate those harmless short visits. In today's climate, they could be the very thing that convinces authorities your life isn't truly in America. Number 5. Proof of daily life in the U.S. Once upon a time, your green card was enough. Today, not even close. Re-entering the U.S. is starting to feel less like showing a document and more like undergoing a residency audit. Border officers aren't just asking, "Where were you?" They're asking, "Where do you really live?" And to answer, they want proof of daily life in America. That means carrying more than just your passport. We're talking utility bills, lease agreements, mortgage statements, U.S. tax filings, pay stubs, school enrollment for your kids, even things like credit card activity within the U.S. or cell phone records tied to American carriers. One retiree found this out the hard way. After just a 5-week trip abroad, she returned with her green card and passport. But when asked for proof of U.S. ties, she couldn't provide a current lease or recent pay stubs. That was enough for officers to mark her green card for review. Her legal status now hangs in limbo, not because she broke a law, but because she didn't have the right folder of papers at the airport. This practice has been criticized as proof-based profiling. It disproportionately hurts elderly immigrants, low-income residents, and those who simply don't carry stacks of documents with them. But officials argue it's necessary to combat fraud. The bottom line? In 2025, a green card isn't always proof enough. You need evidence, paper trails, daily footprints, that show America is still your true home. Without it, you risk being treated like a visitor overstaying their welcome. Number 4. Border officer discretion = green card roulette. Here's where things get really unpredictable. You can have all your paperwork perfect: tax filings, re-entry permits, proof of U.S. residence, a flawless travel record. And still, you could end up in trouble. Why? Because in the end, it can come down to one person, the officer standing at the border. Under the current system, Customs and Border Protection officers are trained not just to check documents, but to assess intent. And intent is subjective. Two green card holders with nearly identical histories can have totally different outcomes. One gets waved through, the other gets detained, interrogated for hours, and handed a notice to appear in immigration court. Immigration attorneys call this green card roulette. Your fate can hinge on how an officer interprets your answers, your body language, or even a gut feeling. And this isn't rare. In 2024 alone, more than 1,000 permanent residents reported being sent to secondary inspection despite having clean records. Many weren't flagged by computers, but by an officer's personal judgment. Some were eventually released, but others walked out with notes in their file, marks that will follow them every time they travel. Critics warn this level of discretion invites bias and inconsistency. Older immigrants, those with limited English, and people from certain regions appear to be questioned more aggressively. Officials argue it gives officers flexibility to detect fraud and abuse. But for green card holders, it feels like walking through customs on eggshells, never knowing if this trip will be the one that unravels everything. The harsh truth? Even with perfect documents, there are no guarantees. Because in today's system, one officer's opinion can weigh more than years of compliance. Number 3, re-entry permits aren't bulletproof. For years, the re-entry permit was considered the golden ticket for green card holders. It was the one document that let you stay abroad for up to 2 years without losing your permanent residency. Many immigrants relied on it for work assignments, family responsibilities, or extended travel. But in 2025, that sense of security is fading fast. A re-entry permit is no longer the shield it once was. Why? Because immigration officers are now treating it as a request, not a guarantee. Here's the reality. Even if your re-entry permit is valid, officers at the airport can still override it if they believe you're actually living abroad instead of in the United States. And this isn't theoretical. It's already happening. Since mid-2024, immigration attorneys have documented more than 300 cases where green card holders with valid re-entry permits were pulled into secondary inspection. Some were questioned for hours. Others had their permits challenged or even revoked on the spot. One case involved a man who did everything right. He applied for a 2-year permit before temporarily moving abroad to manage family affairs. But when he returned after only 8 months, officers accused him of using the permit as a loophole to live overseas while keeping U.S. benefits. His green card was placed under review. Attorneys call this a betrayal, like being handed a seatbelt and then punished for wearing it. But border officials argue that too many people were abusing the system, using re-entry permits like membership cards to live overseas indefinitely while still enjoying U.S. privileges. The message is clear. In 2025, a re-entry permit is not a safety net. It's just another piece of paper that an officer can choose to honor or ignore at the border. Number 2, address consistency and renewals. Most people don't think twice about using different addresses. Maybe you forward your mail to a family member overseas. Maybe you use a foreign address for banking convenience. Maybe your Amazon deliveries go to your brother's house while you're away. Seems harmless, right? Not anymore. U.S. immigration authorities are now cross-checking address histories across multiple systems: tax filings, bank accounts, USCIS renewals, even package delivery records. If your paperwork shows more foreign addresses than U.S. ones, officers can argue that your real home isn't in America. Here's a real case. One man applied to renew his green card. He had never overstayed abroad, never violated the 6-month rule. But his bank statements listed his brother's address in another country, where he often stayed during visits. To him, it was convenience. To immigration officers, it was evidence that his residence was overseas. His renewal was denied, and his green card is now under review. The unsettling part is how small details can create big problems. Even something like forgetting to update your driver's license or leaving an old address on a tax form can raise suspicion. Critics argue this is unfair in a globalized world where people manage finances across borders. But officials insist consistency is everything. If your addresses don't line up, it looks like you've shifted your life abroad. So in 2025, residency isn't just judged by your physical presence, it's judged by your paper trail. And if those papers don't tell a consistent story, you could lose your green card, even if you've lived in the US the whole time. Number 1. The final trip. Before your citizenship interview, this is the harshest rule of all. You can live in the US for years, pay taxes, follow every guideline, and think you're finally ready to become a citizen. But one wrong move, a single trip right before your interview, can erase everything. Here's why. When applying for naturalization, you must prove continuous residence and physical presence in the United States. And officers are scrutinizing the final 6 to 12 months before your application more closely than ever. Even a short absence in that window can be enough to argue you broke continuity. And if they decide you broke it, your application isn't just denied. You could also face questions about whether you deserve to keep your green card at all. Consider this case. A woman traveled to the Philippines to settle a family inheritance. She stayed just over 6 months, returned, and passed both her English and civics exams. But when the officer reviewed her travel history, the verdict was brutal. Her continuity was broken. Her application was denied. She now has to wait 4 more years before applying again. 4 years lost because of one trip. And she's not alone. In 2024, more than 1,200 citizenship applications were denied, reset, or delayed due to travel violations in the year leading up to the interview. Some applicants even had their green card files reopened, putting their residency at risk. What makes this rule especially cruel is that intent doesn't matter. You could travel legally, for a valid reason, with every document in order. But if it looks like you broke continuity, the interpretation alone is enough to sink your case. Critics call this unforgiving, turning green card holders into prisoners of geography. But officials defend it, saying becoming a citizen should require absolute proof that America is your permanent home. The bottom line? The final step towards citizenship is also the riskiest. One wrong move right before your interview, and the dream can vanish overnight. So here's the truth. In 2025, losing your green card isn't about breaking the law, it's about breaking patterns. The rules themselves haven't changed much, but the way they're enforced has become harsher, less forgiving, and more unpredictable than ever. We've seen how something as technical as a tax form, as personal as a hospital bill, or as innocent as a quick trip can be twisted into evidence that you've abandoned the U.S. We've seen how border officers now dig into not just where you go, but how often, what your paperwork says, even what you post online. And we've seen how, at the very end, a single trip before your citizenship interview can undo years of effort. For green card holders, this means every move counts. Every absence, every document, every bill, every address has to align to prove that your life is rooted here in America. Because in this climate, the burden of proof has shifted. It's not about what your green card says, it's about what your life story shows in data, in paperwork, and sometimes in the eyes of a single officer. That's the new reality. One mistake, one inconsistency, one trip too many, and the American dream can vanish overnight. If you found this video valuable, don't leave your future to chance. Hit the like button, subscribe to Wings of Wonder, and turn on notifications. We'll keep you updated on every change that could protect your residency and your path to citizenship.